Well, hello everyone, and happy Wednesday to you. I hope you're having a great day. Welcome to another edition of Take 5, and this week we are talking about the subject entitled The Succeeding Generation. We actually talked about it last week, and Lord willing, we're going to talk about it some more next week. This is an important subject. I can't express to you how important this is. It's something the church of today and tomorrow and after that it needs to grasp. Because this is a responsibility given to us by God, and it is how the church perpetuates and faith perpetuates and this great spiritual heritage and the work of the kingdom. It's how it perpetuates from generation to generation. It does this through predecessors and successors. And so we're talking about now this week the relationship between Elijah and Elisha, looking at some things that happened there in their life and seeing some things that God had to correct in the life of Elijah and learning from this, because we can apply all of that to ourselves today. The generation before us, our generation, the generation that's coming, and the one after that, all of this can be applied to each and every one. You see, when we looked yesterday at Elijah, it seems like that God's greatest concern was his disregard for the next generation and for God's divine plan. That was the big problem. It wasn't anything else. That was the problem. He didn't have any concern for the next generation. And so God had to get a hold of him and straighten him out. And he did. And I'm glad he did, because we learned some valuable lessons through Elijah passing that great heritage on to Elisha. Now, I want to address just basically one thing today about their relationship as we look at those two, predecessor to successor. And I want us to learn this point: the succeeding generation must be embraced by its predecessor. Now listen to that. The succeeding generation must be embraced by its predecessor. Really, I probably should say it different. They should embrace each other because it is essential. Let's look at how this thing started. Elijah left the mountain now, and he's gone to find Elisha and to anoint him. And 1 Kings 19:19 says he found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen in front of him, and he was with the 12th. And Elijah passed by him and cast his cloak or his mantle upon him. Now, Elijah did not give him the mantle at this time. He just merely walked by him in close proximity and took that cloak and threw it at Elisha, threw it over him so that the ends of it would brush over him, and he pulled it back to himself and he walked on. He just brushed him with it and he moved on. The point is this: he had to get close to Elisha. That means he embraced everything that Elisha was. When he walked up and saw that this kid was a farmer, he didn't question whether or not this was God's purpose or God's plan. He didn't care what Elisha was. He didn't care what his heritage was. He didn't care what his past was. He didn't care what Elisha's hopes and dreams were. He didn't ask him. He just got close to him and drew him into this prophetic ministry. He embraced everything that Elisha was. He took him just like he found him, because Elijah knew the future of God's plan had been planted inside the heart of Elisha. So Elijah didn't care about all of the maybe shortcomings or any of the plans or dreams or faults or failures or anything else about Elisha. He just knew that the plan of God had been planted inside of him, and he knew in order to pull that thing out, he had to get close to him, and that's what he did. There's a great lesson in that for all of us today. The passing generation has to be willing to get close to the succeeding generation, and vice versa. The succeeding generation has got to be willing to get close to the passing generation if they're going to learn from them. It's got to happen. You know, you can read later on, jump into 2 Kings chapter 2. This is right before Elijah is caught up into heaven. You can find chapter 2, verse 11 that says this: "And the two were walking along and talking together." They walked along and they talked together. They stayed together. They embraced one another. Elijah embraced Elisha as that successor. Everything that he was and is, he embraced all of that because he knew the plan of God had been planted inside of him. Let me remind you of something today. Doesn't matter the generation that you're in, if you're in my parents' generation or my generation or the generation after, it doesn't matter. You need to look at that generation that is to come, that generation that is supposed to succeed you, and recognize the plan of God has been planted in their heart, and it's up to you and me to nurture that thing and get it out of them so that they can replace us and the church can move forward. The passing generation has got to be willing to take time up with, to put up with, and to endure all the whims of that younger succeeding generation while they are growing and learning and getting prepared to replace them. That can be difficult, but it is something that is essential. On the other hand, the succeeding generation must also be willing to learn from their predecessors' example of faith and commitment and responsibility and faithfulness and endurance and steadfastness and morals, while at the same time overlooking their old ways and styles and preferences. So this is a give and take. This thing is very reciprocal. Both generations have to be willing to accept one another as they are. Now, it's hard for some in the older generation because they cannot physically and mentally see past the generation they live in. The generation before me has that problem. The older I get, that's becoming a problem for me to see past my generation to the changes that are happening in the generations to come. The good news, though, is that if you find somebody in that predecessing generation, that passing generation, if you find somebody that has embraced that succeeding generation, it's because that by faith they see that there is something great planted on the inside of them by God, and they know that God's going to do something greater in and through them than He did in them. So these generations have got to embrace one another. You know, it was a big deal in the church, and the devil has known this, and he has fought this for generations. He has fought generations coming together and working together and embracing one another. You know, it hadn't been so long ago that the church all over America, probably around the world, wasted 15 or 20 years arguing over a style of worship. That should never have been. Our focus shifted to preferences and styles and traditions, and we missed the important things like faith and worship and service and giving and the preaching of the gospel. We missed those things because we got sidetracked by things that were unimportant, things that were unnecessary traditions. We got sidetracked by that. So we've got to learn to embrace these generations, the older to the younger to the older. We must learn to embrace one another, be close like Elijah and Elisha were, so that this great heritage of faith can be passed forward. Friend, listen to me. It's not about how we look, how we dress, how we sing, or how we part our hair. It's not about any of that, friend. It's about the faith of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's about this great spiritual heritage, and we've got to do everything we can to pass it forward. And that means that the generations are going to have to embrace one another as we walk with God. Hey, I've got to get out of here. It's been good being with you today. I look forward to being with you tomorrow on Thursday's edition of Take 5. Till then, God bless you. Have a great day. Hey, trust the Lord, my friend. He will never fail you.